Welcome to the Wander Mode podcast, where we celebrate the fearless spirit of women embracing life's wanderings. Where every story is a spark of inspiration and reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful moments happen when we simply embrace wherever the journey may lead. This conversation is for the ladies listening that just wonder sometimes where their confidence goes. And maybe for you, you've never really been a person that exudes a lot of confidence, or maybe sometimes it ebbs and flows. I know that has definitely been true for me in my life, in my career, in decisions that I'm making. There are some things that seem so easy peasy, right? I have so much confidence and conviction in what it is that I'm doing that I just do the thing and I move on. And then other times I'm left thinking, like, really, Julie? What is going on right now? What were you thinking in this exact moment? So if you are going to listen to this episode, you are really going to get some interesting insight into confidence, and specifically confidence when you are in leadership roles, because I am chatting with Monika Malan today, and she specifically works on coaching women in finding that confidence and finding that confidence in leadership positions so that you can truly do this job or serve in this role that you love. All right, Monika, I think that you are going to be a wealth of wisdom in today's conversation. And I think it's definitely about a topic that a lot of women need to hear about and learn how to show up more confidently in their lives, in their workspaces, in leadership roles, things like that. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really think it's an important conversation to have. So I'm excited for our chat today.
I think to give people a little bit of context before we just dive into this conversation about women and confidence and leadership, can you tell me a little bit about how you came to find yourself in this place of wanting to help other women find their confidence in leadership?
Yeah, so I've always naturally gravitated towards leadership roles. And then when I started officially working after grad school, I was in leadership roles, and over time, I started mentoring and coaching people in the organization. And it just dawned on me, like after like I've been in leadership roles for I think more than 16 years now. And more, I realize that it's the females that need a lot of help with their confidence, with their authority. I also had experiences where, as a woman myself, really struggled to represent myself and to advocate for myself. And I realized that I can really help women in particular overcome these obstacles. The corporate world, especially, is such a male dominated, I don't know if industry is the right word, but it's very male dominated. It's very much geared towards the rush, 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 push, 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 do, do, do. And it feels like a lot of the women that I come across feel like they need to conform to that in order to be successful, but it doesn't come naturally to them. Like they're maybe not as loud or as in your face as males tend to be. And so they feel that they're not good enough. They feel like they can't measure up to that. And it breaks my heart. So I really found a passion for helping women just find their own unique way of being great leaders, because you can be a great leader without being loud and in your face and talking over people and just pushing people to death to get work done. So
Are there a few scenarios that you can think of where you felt like, oh, if only I could just be a little more confident? Or maybe after something happened, you just thought, oh man, like, why did I do that? Or why did I not stand up for myself? Like, are there any particular examples that stand out to you distinctly?
yeah, so the first time I changed jobs from one corporate to another, it was a big culture change and big culture shock for me. They had kind of convinced me to join them on the premise that they really want my input and they value my unique insights and blah, blah, blah. But then when I got there and I was giving my inputs and giving my insights, and I was just politely patted on the head and told to go sit in a corner, basically, They would disregard all my suggestions. They would be like, yeah, 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 okay, that's a good idea. And then continue doing something completely different, and disregarding everything I just said. And that was very frustrating to me, and something I was not used to. And so it took me a while to kind of find my feet and to start advocating for myself and just speaking up and trying to make the impact that I know I could have. So that sticks out for me. That was, like I said, it was unexpected because the previous company valued my opinion a lot more than the new company did. So it really opened my eyes.
Could you give a comparison of what was different between those two companies? Were there more women in leadership roles at the prior company where that made sense then that you had more ownership over your role or what it was that you were sharing? Or was it the same sort of demographics, but just different leadership styles?
Yeah, it was the same demographics. I'm actually in IT, which is also very male dominated. So the demographics were about the same. It was definitely a culture thing. The new company where I was at just had a different outlook. They were pushing for innovation all the time, pushing for new ideas, never like taking stock of where they were at and maybe improving the basics. And in terms of leadership, I think the C suite was rewarding the wrong behavior for leaders. I said they were constantly pushing to go to market with new things. Some departments every month had to launch a new product, some departments had to launch a new product every quarter. And so, in my mind, they were incentivizing the wrong behavior, because if you are rewarding your leaders for taking products to market at all costs, then it gives them leeway to walk all over the employees that they actually
Yeah.
need to produce the work, which does not lead to long term success ultimately. So I think it was a culture thing. So the first company was very much more conservative, long term oriented, where the second company was more push for delivery and launches. Yeah.
It's fascinating talking with you about this because my husband was also in IT, and I hands down agree that it's definitely a male dominated career choice. I was a teacher, which is a very female dominated career choice because I had a female principal. I was surrounded by a lot of other female teachers. Now, I would have said that there were varying levels of confidence even within those females and the different roles that we played. But it is interesting, though, when you introduce some of the gender dynamics, how you're looking around the room and you're seeing yourself and other people. When that dynamic is not as in your favor, it's so much
Yeah,
harder to show up how you want.
yeah, definitely. I think it's a balance. Like, I don't think the male way of doing things is necessarily better than the female way of doing things, or the other way around. We definitely complement each other. I think it's about finding that balance, and it's about understanding that we complement each other rather than just trying to force everybody to conform to one way of doing things. And yeah, seeing yourself represented in the room really makes a big difference. That is another reason why I started my business, to coach other female leaders. You're not alone. There are others that have walked this path, and let's support one another, and let's all make a success out of being leaders and being ourselves at the same time.
Now, you live in South Africa,
That's right.
correct? So, would you also say that there is a component there too of showing up confidently that has to do with geography?
It would be interesting if there was. I haven't noticed particularly, but it may just be because I haven't had a large enough sample size, but not geography so much. I think the struggles that as women we face are pretty universal, sadly. I would say there are differences in cultures and demographics in terms of different races and stuff, but not so much geography, no.
But maybe it's more appropriate to ask it from a cultural perspective. But I don't tend to work with a ton of people that are outside of the United States, for example, that would have overarching different cultural norms compared to people in the United States. And so it's always kind of a curious question to me of, are you expected from a cultural perspective to show up in a particular sort of way? And so then therefore, to your point, you can't really show up as being authentically
Yeah.
you because of some exterior restrictions that have nothing to do with how you want to show up.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. We are a very culturally diverse country. So I've had a lot of exposure to people from different cultures, different races, different religions. So it is definitely interesting to see how all of those components affect how you show up in the workplace. And personally, I've been doing a lot of work. I think the term for the moment is parenting your inner child. But it's
Mm-hmm.
just interesting to me to also notice how some of the kind of beliefs we just absorb growing up then reflect in the workplace. And a lot of those inherent beliefs we need to overcome or reparent yourself, if you will, to be the best version of you that you can be. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I definitely want to unpack that a little bit more because I actually just had a guest on my podcast who talked a lot about that inner child and that the repair work that can be done to yourself can only happen from yourself. Like by literally going back into that inner child and talking to her and asking what she needs and what you need to do. And you have to go back to that inner child. So let's definitely unpack that a little bit. And then how you connect that to how we show up confidently in our personal lives, at work, etc. What have you noticed some of the correlations are?
So, quite early in my career as a leader, I had this male manager, awesome guy, but like very confident, one of those like very confident, very loud kind of people, always making jokes and stuff. And I'd made a mistake. I forget what it was now, but I'd made a mistake and I had to go own up. And he just talked to me about it. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. So what went wrong? What can we do to fix it? And I remember thinking he didn't shout at me. He didn't
Mm.
like completely lose it. And up until that point, I hadn't realized that I had this fear of someone shouting at me because I'd made a mistake. And I unpacked that a little bit, and it's something I'm still working on actually. And I realized that growing up, my dad had a very short temper. So, I mean, he was never abusive or anything like that, don't get me wrong, but he would often get upset at the tiniest thing and he would shout, maybe throw things, and like 5 minutes later, he would be fine and move on with his life. But I never realized what an impact that had on me. And here I was approaching this older man in a position of authority over me, and I was fully expecting him to start shouting at me and losing it, even though now looking back at it, it feels kind of silly to think about. But it was quite an interesting situation for me to unpack and work through. And like I said, I sometimes still need to go back and work on that to get over and help with my confidence, because once you know what your triggers are and what you're dealing with, it just makes it easier to prepare and then respond appropriately if the situation does come up again.
Well, and I think too, to your point, we don't always know what those things are going to be until we're in situations that bring something up. And I think the key often is we need to take the time to actually unpack that thing, to actually pause long enough to think, why was that my reaction? Obviously by the time we become adults, we're pretty conditioned to be who we're going to be. And it takes a lot of time and effort to reverse any of our habits. But I think sometimes when we can actually step back, like you did in that situation, and say, well, whoa, wait a second. Why did that actually throw me off? You could have just said, he didn't yell, or that was interesting. That wasn't the reaction that I had thought. And you could have just moved on and not really thought much else about it. But I think sometimes we don't often give enough credit to those reactions and say, why was that
Yeah.
my reaction? Why was I actually surprised that that was that person's reaction? Because sometimes when we dig just a little deeper, it doesn't mean that we have to go unpack our whole family history or go have a conversation with our dad or friend or whatever, but it's more of just that awareness of what makes us us.
Yeah, 100%. It's always just asking the why, just to think a little bit further and just be kind to yourself. We all have stuff we need to deal with from our childhood.
Mhm. So, would you say that that's where you start when you're working with a client? Would you say that that's sort of your starting point of let's go back into that inner child?
Yeah, and not so much directly that. I feel like I want to guide people in a more practical way. So I like to focus first on having someone identify their values. It sounds very basic, but a lot of people don't really articulate what their values are and what they stand for. And I feel that is so foundational to everything you do, especially as a leader. And knowing your values and what you stand for will make you feel confident in your actions, because you know then that your actions are aligned with who you are. But then in the process of digging deeper into what are your values, what do you ultimately want to achieve, what do you stand for, you start unpacking things like, why is this important to me? Why is this something that I need to prioritize in my life? So I start by focusing on the values and just making people aware that you need to start acting with intention, and then we take it from there.
That really resonates with me, actually, is a very great place to start, because I think oftentimes in life we set these goals and we don't understand the why behind them or the value behind them. And so it doesn't stick because it's just a goal. So if it falls off the bandwagon, it's kind of like, well, who really cares? I mean, how many people set the goal in a new year of saying, okay, I want to lose 10 pounds? Okay. Well, the second that you're not able to work out or something happens, you're kind of like, okay, well, it didn't happen this year. It didn't happen last year. No big deal. But when you get behind the goal and saying, why do I want to lose 10 pounds? What is losing that 10 pounds actually going to do for me? Okay, I think that if I lost this 10 pounds, I'm going to feel better about my body, or I'm going to be able to move this certain way, or I'm going to be able to go do this certain activity. Okay, well, why does that certain activity matter? Well, it matters to me because my kid likes to do it and I can't do it with them, right? So the more that you start peeling back those layers behind these goals that we set, it is actually something that lands and matters more to you, because it's not just 10 pounds. It's, I want to be able to do this thing with my kid, and right now I can't. Well, if this matters that much to me, I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah, 100%. I firmly believe it's not a matter of you don't have time, it's a matter of it's not a priority. So
Yes.
you need to decide what your values are, what your priorities are. And I actually have a client where through our work together, because I encourage you to look like, if you want to be a good leader, if you want to act with integrity, you should make sure that you are acting in line with what you're saying. But that gets difficult if you're working in a company that doesn't align with your values. No values are right or wrong, but some values are just incompatible, or it doesn't align with you personally. And so this client has actually come to the realization that the place where she is working at is toxic to her, because it's in complete contradiction to what she values, and it's causing a lot of strife in her life. And then because of that inner work that she's doing, she's now looking for something that's going to support her life a lot better, and that will ultimately lead to more happiness. So it's such important work. I just wish more people had the courage to do it.
Why do you think they don't have the courage to do it? Why do you think that a lot of people are resistant to that?
I wish I had an easy answer to that. I don't know. I feel some people just fear change, to be honest. And in fact, I think most of us prefer comfort. And actually, I've been listening to this podcast. Melina Palmer, I don't know if you've heard her, but she's a behavioral economist. But she talks about how the brain, it tries to keep you safe by convincing you that the current status quo, the comfort where you're at now, is the place to be. Your brain is trying to keep you safe. And so most people prefer the comfort of the current situation because they know the current situation, they know that it's comfort, and it's scary to change. It's scary to start questioning that. It's scary to rock the boat. So a lot of people just don't do it. They'd rather stay where they're at.
That is so fascinating that you bring that up. I'm definitely going to have to get her name from you, because I would love to listen to that podcast. I really am fascinated by the why behind why we are the way that we are, just as human beings in general. Why do we tend to lean towards certain things versus other? And that's fascinating that the brain actually wants to keep us in a state of comfort or like mild
Mm.
satisfaction. I just finished a historical fiction book about a family that fled from Ukraine to try to have a better life post World War II. And that theme comes up so much in that book of, but this is okay for me right now. Like, I don't love it. I'm not thriving. I want more, but I have a roof over my head and I have food. I have my basics, basically. But if you think about that, when it comes back to what you're saying with the brain and this state of comfort, what are the two basic things, right? It's safety. And what makes you feel safe? You have shelter and you have food. But as human beings, we're capable and intelligent enough for wanting more for ourselves than just that. But you have to push the envelope in order to have that happen.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if in general people really want to stay in this place of comfort. How do you go about coaching those individuals or trying to even secure clients when our natural tendencies are to want to stay in what's comfortable and not push the envelope? What strategies do you have there for piercing that shield a little bit and making people think like, no, actually, I do want to be different?
I try and do that by exposing a different way of doing things. So I want to talk about the differences in leadership between male and female. I don't want to hide it away and sweep it under the carpet. And I think just start raising awareness around the differences in how we are treated, for example, in the workplace. It's funny because I want to highlight those differences, but I actually try not to focus on it too much because it upsets me and I take it really personally. And I know I shouldn't become like a bra burning feminist, like walking down the street. But I mean, there's things like it was just the other day, like equal pay day, for example. On average, for the rest of the year, women are working for free. If you compare like salaries, what males get paid versus females. So there's that kind of angle. There's also the angle of the default is when you're talking about leadership is you imagine a white male. So we should all try that when we're talking about leadership, talk about a female in a position of CEO or what the case may be. There's also this thing about we women, our hormones cycle in a roughly 27-day cycle. We've got different strengths at different times of our cycle. At some points in time, we communicate really clearly. At other times, we're really in an organizational planning, like task oriented stage. And by highlighting these kind of differences and saying, just manage your workload in such a way as far as possible to coincide with your cycle, you can be a lot more productive, a lot happier rather than trying to conform to the male way of doing things because the male hormones cycle in a 24-hour cycle every day. It's the same cycle as women, it's just 24 hours. Not exactly the same, but kind of. So you're killing yourself trying to keep up with what men are doing. You can keep up if you expand your view to a month instead of trying to do it day by day. So highlighting these differences and just making women aware that there are different ways of doing things and you can be successful without being loud, without being a bully, without being in your face. And then hopefully that will trigger women to think, well, maybe I'm not as happy as I think I am, or I could be doing things differently. And then from there, the conversation starts.
I could see how that would definitely trigger a conversation because I think overall, we want to be the most productive that we can be. We want to contribute to these companies that we work with. We want to be outstanding leaders. We want to be viewed as fully capable, contributing beings. But to your point, I think sometimes we don't necessarily fully understand what gets in our way.
Exactly. It's about awareness, really. It all starts with awareness, and then hopefully from awareness, you start implementing changes and then start asking questions. So, what else can I do to be a better leader and a better person?
Oh, I love that. I think that that's amazing. So, if your starting point is sort of evaluating values for your client and what it is that they're wanting out of their career, what is your process like for starting to develop some of the confidence side of things?
It's very much a hands-on approach. It's much easier when you're talking one-on-one if the person has got examples and you can talk through scenarios and discuss different ways they could have done it to help them prepare for if a situation comes up again. The
Mhm.
important part, what makes you as a coach, is helping someone apply that in practice. So I like to ask a lot of reflection questions ahead of sessions. I like to have them prepare, think of scenarios that have gone well, that hasn't gone well, or maybe observe someone in their work environment that they feel is very confident and pick up how they act, what do they do, or conversely, what do they do that you feel is wrong or could have been done better? Because you can learn from that. And then we have discussions and we unpack it and we talk about how it could have been done differently or how handling it in different ways could have had different outcomes. So it's very much a practical tailored one-on-one discussion that we have.
I guess my question for you is why confidence? Why did that one skill or like that one trait really stand out to you as the world needs more of this from women?
I feel a lot of women, myself included, have self worth issues. I think a lot of what we spoke about earlier, inner child work, digging deep into the root of how we act and react, a lot of the times it boils down to a lack of self worth, of not feeling worthy. It's based on observation from my personal experience. It's based on a lot of self development I've done over the past year or two, where I've obviously interacted with other coaches and stuff. So I just feel when you're talking to someone, they don't necessarily realize that the root of the problem is self worth. But if you frame it in a way where you say, are you confident in your decisions? Are you confident that you're acting in the right way? Do you feel confident in the room that you're in? Do you feel confident that you've got something of worth to say? It resonates more clearly with people. I think it's something they can relate to, because a lot of women will say, I don't have the confidence, or someone bulldozed me, or I second guess a lot of my decisions. And so
Mhm.
confidence, even though I just feel that's a better understood term, but at its core, it really boils down to this feeling of self-worth and really how worthy am I of being in this role.
I like how you boiled that down, and really, I can appreciate that you chose confidence because in listening to what you're saying, your self worth impacts so many things. So, if you don't have a high amount of self worth, if you aren't showing up confidently, that impacts a lot of things. I think even how great of a listener you are. Like, are you actually listening to what somebody else says? I feel like people who have lower self worth tend to insert a lot because they're intimidated by what somebody else is sharing, or they feel like they're not maybe enough compared to this other person. So then it's kind of like, I don't want to continue to compare myself. So I'm just going to find a way of dictating the direction that this is going so that I can feel like I have a little bit more control or power. I feel like a lack of confidence or a lack of self worth also impacts how you feel on a day-to-day basis about a lot of the things, like this is happening to me versus me making something happen. Like there's so many different ways that that impacts aspects of your life that I can definitely appreciate why you landed on confidence, because it is this term that we all understand, and I think everybody wants to be able to say I'm this confident person because we have such positive connotations with that
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, and I mean, if you really start digging deeper into it, the more you practice emotional intelligence, the more you do active listening, the more you plan ahead, consult your team, the more you prepare, all that type of things. It all leads to you being more confident when you speak to senior leadership, when you make decisions, because you have all this information of all the other stuff you've been doing, all the stuff you've been talking with your team about. You've been taking to heart, you've been listening to them, you're not just disregarding what they're saying. It all helps you be a much more confident and effective leader at the end of the day.
Gives you an anchor versus just letting the waves hit you and hit you and hit you. You're anchored to a spot and you know, this is my self worth. This is what I'm capable of. This is what I can do. And so a lot of things can come your way, but you stay very
Yeah.
solid. What's so fascinating about what you just said is I am very much in this place of not having a ton of confidence in my business side of my life. And one of the things that I explained to my husband this last week, because we were on a trip and we had just more time to talk, was I don't feel anchored. I don't feel like I have a very clear direction forward. I feel like I'm just trying to figure all these things out. And as I sit back and think about it, I am normally a very organized, detail oriented person. And yet, that lack of confidence in that business space for me, it's just a clear example of it's infiltrating everything. And my inability to then be anchored to one spot and do life the way that I'm used to doing because I've lost this anchor in this other part. Just as you were talking about that, I was like, oh my gosh, like this explains so much of why it is for me that I'm sitting here like, how am I not figuring out what I should be doing today? Or I'm not getting these tasks done, or I'm not as organized as I usually am, or whatever.
Yeah, it's a tough space to
Mm,
be in, but just be kind to yourself. We all go through periods, and I think it's a period of growth for you. It's and for all of us when we go through this type of thing, because you're questioning, you're not just accepting, and you'll make
mhm.
changes. And I think you'll be a lot stronger and better for it at the end of it. So be kind to yourself. It's all for the greater good.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. Yeah, and to your point, I think we do have to have some grace for ourselves, especially women who are wanting to be leaders. We strive for these things that we want. We're willing to get outside of our comfort zone. I think it is the biggest downfall is that we often then don't give ourselves that grace when we need it, because it's kind of like, but I'm striving for this thing and I'm trying to do it perfect and I'm trying to make it this certain way. And I had so much confidence here, but now my confidence is shaken. So then you go down all these little rabbit holes of then maybe it's not going to be successful, or it's not going to work, or you start to have a lot of self-doubt. But you're right, like in those moments it is so important to pause and give yourself some grace. We're human, right?
Yeah, for sure. Someone explained to me once that challenges you go through are kind of like a spiral. It's something spiraling upwards. And kind of like the first time you go through a challenge, it takes a long time to kind of work through it. You know, that's the base of the spiral, right? It's a bigger circle. And then as you come up and that challenge comes around again, because I'm sure this is not the first time you've gone through something like this. I mean, challenges tend to repeat themselves because we as humans have certain areas of growth that we need to get better at, but it's never just a one-time thing. No, no, no. Life wouldn't be that easy. But then we go through the spiral, and next time the challenge comes around, we deal with it a little bit better. Then that time the circle
Mm.
is a little bit smaller, and then the next time it comes around, we work through it a little bit quicker. And it's just part of being human, I guess, is going through these phases, through these challenges, and doing a little bit better each time the same kind of theme comes up again.
Wow. Well, I think that is a beautiful place actually to pause our conversation, because I think that that's a really great way of looking at it, that the first time we encounter any challenge, it's going to feel big. And then each time it comes around and it manifests itself in a little bit of a different way, we will have gained the skills to handle it a little better, and it will get smaller and smaller every time. I love that. That's beautiful. If someone wanted to work with you and find that confidence in leadership, where is the best place for them to go to find you?
I am mostly on LinkedIn. It's Monika Malan, and that's Monica with a K. But then I also have a freebie for anyone that's keen to just get the basics down of upping your confidence and techniques to speak up and be heard, especially in the corporate world. You can go to my website. It's sheleadsboldly.com/confidence.
Perfect. And I'll be sure to link the freebie in the show notes and to Monica's social media and LinkedIn profiles as well. I wish I could get better at LinkedIn. It's not a space that I feel like I really understand the layout. I don't know. Maybe I need to go to your LinkedIn and get some ideas.
I don't
Gotta
pretend to
show
be
up
an
there.
expert at all. It just feels to me the most natural place since I'm dealing with leaders
Yes.
in corporate. I am on Instagram as well, but I'm not as active on there. So I think LinkedIn
Okay.
is better.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Monica. And I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me
Thank you
today.
so much for having me. It was really good. It was a really good talk.
Thanks for wandering with me today. If you were inspired by this episode and think it would ignite a spark in a friend, don't hesitate to share. And if you're craving more from the Wander Mode community, hop on over to Instagram at WanderModeCo. Meet you in the next episode, and until then, wander on.